Hello there, everybody. My name is TricksterShadow. If you don't know me, I have about 300 to 500 hours across the entirety of the VHS closed beta, from the dev's own client version to the Steam version. About 300 to 500 hours, and a majority of that is in Monster. So, with the release of Early Access, I wanted to try to compile the 10 best tips that I could think of for Monster players that are coming into the game, want to try out Monster, and want to try to have a really good shot at it, want to try to get better at their matches, want to try to play the best that they can do. And so I have 10 tips for every new monster that is coming into VHS. Now, my first tip is something that I think is very crucial to playing Monster in VHS. Now, this may seem pretty obvious, but I think that you should go to the tutorials and training and then play out, of course, both the teen and Monster tutorial. But outside of that, I think that you should go into the training room for teen. And the reason why I say this, well, like TricksterShadow, I'm trying to play Monster. I'm trying to play Monster better. Well, the thing is, the training room for teen is very, very helpful for both teen and Monster players because a huge element of VHS is understanding how the weapons work. And so if we go into the training room for teen and we go up to this table, we can scroll through all of the weapons that exist within VHS. And so before you even load into your first match, I highly suggest, whether you're playing as teen or playing as Monster, I highly suggest you just go up to this table, just press on every weapon, and then just try to fire it and see like how does this weapon actually work, and try to actually like kill and like stun the monster with it. And just by doing this, and you may not know like how to directly counter all of these weapons just by using them once, but just by seeing like how they fire, like kind of like charges they do. Oh, this sword, like it does like a giant wave. And if you go through the wave, then you start getting damage. Just by understanding the basics of all the weapons and how they fire and how they operate, this will help you a lot in your matches as both teen and Monster, especially as Monster, because if you know how the weapons work, then you can try to like begin figuring out how to counter them. So I highly suggest that you go into this room and you just try out all the weapons, and it'll help you quite a lot. Now, my second tip for Monster players is to really stick to one type of monster when you're trying to learn the game. Specifically, I think the best monster to learn with is the WART, as you can see on the screen. And the reason why I say that is because I think WART's ability is very easy to understand and is pretty good for learning VHS. Now, the reason why I say WART is very good for learning in VHS and is very easy to understand is because WART's ability really, of course, isn't that complex. So if we look on the lower right-hand corner of the screen, we can see all three of WART's abilities. All of the monsters have three abilities that you can use. Typically, they have like a chase or a catch-up ability. And they have another ability to help out with dealing with weapons. And then they have something to help them find people on the map. Of course, with different monsters, this may change a little bit. Dollmaster varies from this formula a little bit. But for WART, this is definitely the case. So the Q ability, very straightforward. You Q, and then you just leap forward, and you can see there's a green circle that displays around WART wherever he lands. And this green circle, you may be wondering, oh, what does the green circle do? Well, if we chase this I was about to say this WART, this Brett in the training room, we can pounce towards him, and you can see that he kind of like slows down a little bit. He puts up his hand. If you hit somebody with the AoE of the leap, then it slows them down. It makes them easier to catch up to because they're staggered, and it's pretty easy to use. Just leap in the direction of somebody. If you leap close to them, then they get staggered. Now for the armor ability, pretty straightforward. All you gotta do is just armor up, and then for 12 seconds after you armor up, you can just take weapon damage, and if they eat your shield, it'll just break your shield instead of you losing one of your stigma health states. It's very good for making more aggressive plays, figuring out the extent of what you can do against teens, and just trying stuff without actually losing one of your lives. And then finally, on WART, there's the tracking ability. So with this tracking ability, it's the echolocation. Really what it does is you channel it, it sends out a wave, and then when it comes back, you get about like a 2 or 3 second delayed information. So of course, the Brett did go through here. The Brett is no longer here. He's already ran around. And so you get a general idea of the area of where somebody is. And so it's very good for going around the map and getting the general idea of where teens might be. Now for my third tip, when you actually do load into a match of VHS as Monster, for about the first 16 seconds of the match, you'll actually spawn in as a teen. Now this first 16 seconds is really meant for you to just run around and try to ambush people. But what you should do during the 16 seconds is pretty crucial. I believe the best way to play this out, especially as WART, is just to run around as many stations as you can If you think that somebody may be at a particular station, run over there. If you don't hear them crafting, immediately just run to another station. Don't bother searching for people in this mode. Just run around, try to hear somebody. If you do hear somebody, put your body in a position where you can see like all of the means of escape while you're transform, and just try to find that person and zero in on them. And if you can't find them, don't sweat it. Just go somewhere else, try to hear crafting, and just rinse and repeat. Now, after you do transform and you get into those chases, after the first 40 seconds of the match, you should be a little bit wary of weapons that may have already been created. Now, it takes about 30 to 50 seconds, depending on the weapon, to actually make a weapon and then get it charged, or make a weapon and just have it immediately be able to be used. And so after the first 40 seconds, you should expect if somebody's running kind of like an odd way, or if they're running to a particular spot, they may be leading you to an ambush. And these ambush spots can be really anywhere in the map. So after the first 40 seconds, think, is this person leading me to my death? If you think that they are, they probably are doing that. And so you may want to move from cover to cover, and you may want to avoid some typical ambush spots. Now, what are typical ambush spots? Well, good thing you asked. Because for my 5th tip, you should always avoid 2 typical ambush spots that teens really regularly use. The first one being stairs. If you see any staircase in VHS and you don't know where the teens are, you should approach it very cautiously. A lot of staircases are typical ambush spots for teens, and the reason why is pretty obvious. It's kind of like a choke point, and while you're in that choke point, you're very vulnerable, because if they throw like an AoE weapon or they whip around the corner and hit you while you're climbing the stairs, there's not much you can do. And so if you come to a staircase in particular, you should try to either like use your armor as WART or use your leap to get across the stairs as fast as possible, because you don't want to stay on those stairs for that long. And now, as equally terrifying as well as stairs is hallways. If you're ever going down a hallway in VHS, you should stop and think to yourself, is there a better way I can approach this? Because for most hallways in VHS, there's little side rooms that you can duck in and out of, and you can try to avoid just running down a straight hallway and being in another choke point. So whenever you see a hallway or a staircase in VHS, try to think, is there a better route that I could be going? And if there isn't a better route, what can I do to try to minimize the ambush potential being inflicted upon me? Now for my 6th tip, I think this is a very, very important tip, especially because a lot of people don't realize this when they're coming from other asymmetrical games to VHS. This is a game where as Monster, you set the tempo of the match. You don't have to try to win this game as fast as possible. If you see a situation that you don't think is very advantageous to you, if you see a bunch of teens with weapons and you don't really know how to approach it, or they're being super aggressive and you think that they're going to corner you, just run away. That's one of the very good things about VHS. If you don't think a battle is meant for you, if you think a battle is outside of your control or something that isn't very favorable to you, just run away, try to hit it from a different side, try to reassess. If you want to try to win this game, you need to be patient. If you're just constantly hyper aggressive, that can work to a certain extent, but your hyper aggression has to be within measure. You got to try to approach every situation as kind of like a little chess game. If people are trying to outplay you, how can you outplay them? And if outplaying them requires you to kind of take a breather, take a step back, and then approach from a different direction, that may be what you need to do. So remember, never try to win this game as fast as possible. If you don't see a situation that is good for you, just run away, come back to it later. Now let's say, for my 7th tip, you do find yourself cornered or you find yourself taking weapon damage. Now, should you panic? No, you shouldn't panic. Now the thing in VHS, when somebody starts hitting you with a weapon, for the most part, as long as it's not like an AoE weapon or an insta-kill weapon, you can avoid the weapon damage and get away in a lot of scenarios. Now let's say somebody is hitting you with like a cross. Now cross weapons, they do damage over time. And one thing that you may not know about VHS, if you haven't played it before, haven't seen any gameplay, in order for somebody to kill you, they have to do 100% damage to you. If they do 99% damage, but don't get that final last tick of damage, they don't kill you. And all of the weapons of VHS have a finite amount of ammo. So if they don't get you with that 99% of damage, they just wasted a lot of their weapon. And so if you start getting attacked in VHS, instead of panicking and freezing up and doing nothing, what you should do is try to duck behind cover. And by ducking behind cover, not only are you preserving your own life and preventing them from getting a stigma kill on you, but you're also wasting a lot of their ammo and making it to where they're either going to have to trash that weapon or most likely they're going to be hit by you because now you've regained your faculties. You may be able to armor up now that you're behind cover, and they're in a pretty bad spot with a weapon that has used a lot of ammo, not gotten anything out of it. And that very much so ties into my 8th tip. Now, as Monster, you may be thinking a lot of situations like, oh, I wasn't able to down that person, because when you down somebody, you break their weapon. Which is very good, obviously, as Monster, because you want to break their weapons because the less weapons there are in the match, the easier it is for you to win. But don't worry if you can't break somebody's weapon because you can't down them, because if you can make somebody even use a little bit of their weapon, just try to like keep you away from them, or they're trying to kill you and you duck behind cover and make it to where they can't kill you, they just waste weapon charges, that is very good, because the more weapon charges you can waste, that is less weapon charges that can be used on you later on in the match. And so if you ever have people using their weapon charges on you, but you're not getting rid of weapons by downing people, don't worry, you're progressing the game just fine, and those weapon charges being gone may end up getting you the win. Now for my 9th tip, this is a pretty lengthy tip, and the reason why this is so lengthy is I feel like this is pretty important to talk about. Now, these weapons in particular that I'm about to talk about are typically the most scary weapons for monster players to face, and so I feel like this justifies a pretty lengthy tip to try to explain the basic counterplay of them. Now, what weapons am I talking about? I'm talking about RC weapons. Now, these RC weapons, there's currently 3 RC weapons in the game. There is the RC helicopter, of course, and then there is the eye, and there's the shock sphere. And these weapons are extremely, extremely powerful. The reason why these weapons are powerful is because these weapons can be used to kind of flush out a monster from their little hidey hole, or prevent a monster from running away or playing a lot more defensively, really. And these weapons, as a monster, are something that you really need to look out for. Now let's go through these weapons one by one and talk about what they do and how to counter them. Now the RC helicopter. All it really is when you see it in a team's hand is a little flight control pad. When the team decides to use that weapon, they'll start channeling with the control pad, and a helicopter will spawn in front of them. The helicopter can fly around the map while it uses charges flying. And if it finds the monster, it can attack the monster with a little laser beam that shoots in front of it. And if it shoots 100% of that laser beam onto the monster, then it will get the kill. Now, as WART, there are 3 counterplays that you can do for the RC helicopter. The first one is pretty obvious. You can just armor. By armoring, you're protecting yourself from weapon damage. They won't be able to hurt you and kill you if you have your armor up. And so armoring up when you hear RC helicopter is a very good idea. Typically, when you armor up and you hear RC helicopter, you want to try to run in the opposite direction, because that helicopter can still fly around you and prevent you from hitting it. And so running away while you have your armor up ensures that they can't follow you and do damage, and you can gain some distance and waste a little bit more of their weapon charges while they fly around. Now, the second thing that you can do against the RC helicopter is you can find the person that is controlling the helicopter and you can hit them, because while they're controlling the helicopter and their cameras inside the helicopter, their body is still somewhere controlling it. And so if you hit the person that's controlling the helicopter, it'll disrupt it and stop all weapon dealing in the area. Now, the third thing you can do for the RC helicopter is probably the best counterplay to it. Now, typically when you armor up and you run away, if you hear the helicopter still coming, then what you can do is you can duck behind a doorway. And then when you see the light of the helicopter, because that's a light attached to it, when you see the light of the helicopter around the doorway, you go out around the doorway, you confront it, and you hit it. Because hitting the helicopter will despawn it and prevent the person from killing you with it. Now, the second type of RC weapon is the eye. Now, the eye is a very powerful weapon for one main reason. It is an insta-kill weapon. If it touches you while you're a monster, it'll instantly take you out of that stigma. Now, how does the eye work? Now, the eye works similar to the RC copter, except with the eye, the team will begin chanting some demonic chants. An eye will spawn right in front of them, and they can control that eye in a first-person POV. Now, the eye is very loud, so if you get any amount of distance away from the eye user, it may be harder for them to catch up to you, just plainly because it's kind of hard to hear where the monster's footsteps and tension track are with how loud the eye is. Now, if you want to try to counter the eye as WART in particular, there are 2 things that you can do. You can do similar to the RC copter. You can find the person that is controlling it. You can find their body and smack them, and it'll pull them out of the eye. Now, if the eye is coming after you, the second thing that you can do against it is armoring up, going around a doorway, and then when you think that it's close to you, coming back around the doorway, and with your armor still up, you want to try to run into the eye. If you can get the eye to eat your armor, it'll instantly break that weapon, prevent that person from being able to use it again, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, the good thing about the eye, outside of those 2 counterplays that you can do, is if you get somebody to despawn the eye because they have no idea where you went, that person was using weapon charges the entire time they are flying it around. And really, about 2 or 3 uses of the eye, they're not going to have much left. After 2 uses, they're going to have to be really close to you in order to get that kill. So if you can make them waste any amount of time in those RC weapons, that is very valuable. Now, the third RC weapon is a really controversial one, if I'm going to be honest with you. This is one that I see a lot of people dislike, and I think the reason why they dislike it is just because of how in your face it is. Now, this weapon is a shock spear. I say this is an RC weapon, when in reality, it's not so much, but it's in a similar vein as the helicopter and the eye. Now, this shock spear weapon is another insta-kill weapon, like the eye, but this weapon doesn't have somebody controlling it in a certain position on the map. The person that's controlling it is inside of the shock spear. Now, if this shock spear hits you, obviously it'll insta-kill you. So what you want to do is if you see somebody with a shock spear, you want to make sure that you have your armor up. And if they start charging, their shock spear has a very long charge up, then you start armoring. If they stop charging it, you stop armoring. You only want to complete your armoring when they fully go into their shock sphere. And when they fully go into their shock sphere, you want to armor up and immediately go in the opposite direction. Now, you may be thinking, well, I'm the monster. Like, why can't I just go engage them? That shock sphere has 20 seconds of duration of flight time. And if you armor up and go in the opposite direction, the shock sphere user is actually deaf. They can't hear where you're going. They can't hear your attention track. They can't hear your footsteps. And so if you armor up, go in the opposite direction, even if they follow you, they'll most likely lose track of you if you dip in and out of hallways and break line of sight. If they do manage to follow you, though, then you have your armor up and you can do the trick that you do with the other RC weapons, with the RC helicopter, with the eye. Go around a corner when you think they're close, come back out and try to get them to eat your armor. But besides doing that, I would highly suggest just going in the opposite direction. The shock sphere has to ramp up in speed when the shock sphere user initially gets into it. And so you can gain quite a bit of distance. Getting them to even use 1 flight time out of the shock sphere, after they get out of that, they're probably not going to have much time left. And so it's really just a 1 or done, maybe 2. And on that second one, they're really going to have to get you within a couple seconds. Otherwise, that weapon is just going to be kaput. Now for my 10th tip, my 10th and final tip. Now this goes very in line with what I was just talking about right now. And my 9th tip, talking all about these RC weapons and how to counter them and like what they do. You need to take every loss as a learning opportunity. Every loss and every banishment, every time that you make a mistake or every time that something doesn't go your way, you need to think about what could I have done better? Because really everything in this game has a counter and has a strategy. And you can tell just by me talking about those RC weapons, the RC helicopter, the eye, and the shock spear, there are certain strategies that you can use to really nullify the effectiveness of those weapons. And so when you're playing as monster and you see a situation happen to you that, oh, well, you may be thinking like, oh, like, what do I do in that situation? If you take a step back and look at the situation, you can figure out really easily like what you could have done. If you pushed into a hallway and you get killed, oh, they killed me from that spot. I need to remember that's an ambush spot. If you push on a staircase and you get killed there, oh, that's an ambush spot right there. If you see a weapon that you haven't seen before, which you really should have seen before because you should go in the training room. But if you see a weapon that you haven't seen before and they used against you, you can remember, okay, that's how that weapon works. And that was that person using it effectively. I need to try to prevent them from being in that situation to use it effectively again. You take every single situation as a learning opportunity and you'll become very good at monster very, very fast. Now, thank you all for watching. I understand that all of these tips may not make you a god tier monster main, but it'll definitely set you on your way. I really hope these tips help you guys. If you guys would like me to make a video about 10 teen tips, because I have also played quite a bit of teen, I can also make that if that's something that you guys would want. Just tell me in the comments down below. If these tips have helped you in any way after you play your matches, you can come back to this video, tell me that they helped you. I would love to hear that. Or you can come to my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/TricksterShadow. You can tell me directly in my chat that they've helped you, or you can tell me that they haven't helped you. And I can try to help you one-on-one and try to understand what you're struggling with in the game. And I can try to provide you in real-time tips so that you can adjust your gameplay to make your game a little bit easier. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next video, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day. Enjoy the Beyond.